What is the aggregate supply? Aggregate supply. What did Chapter 2's production possibilities frontier teach us? The old PPF. I like to come back to that. We started off with Tom and Jen on the island, coconuts and fish. What did the production possibilities frontier teach us? We can't gain more of one good without giving up some of the other, right? So that frontier that we created for Tom and Jen, if we had enough information, we'd expect it to be bowed outward from the origin. And if we had coconuts and fish, it shows the maximum potential for the economy. As Katie pointed out, we can't have more of one good without giving up some of the other. In other words, if you're here at point A and you'd like to have more fish, you have to give up some coconuts. You have no choice because you were efficient. You were productively efficient at point A, and now you want to get to point B. The only way you can do it is to give up some. So this represents the maximum levels of production. We could be anywhere along there, but it represents some sort of boundary that we really can't go outside of, right? One of the early lessons was, what's true about a point out here? Well, it's impossible. Given the resources and technology that we have today, you can't get to that point. How do you get to that point over time? Economic growth. So more resources. If there's an increase in capital accumulation, Chapter 6, long-term economic growth. If we invest in capital of all forms, possibly human capital through education. So if we continue to get more and more capital, human capital and physical capital, we can potentially get out to that point, but we can't get there right now without additional resources or technology. And that indeed was exactly what economic growth was. So now I'm dealing in this space. What does that mean then if we think about the ideas here of only having so much stuff on our island, some amount of land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship at any given point in time, we can only make so much stuff. That creates an upper limit moving along the horizontal axis. So if we're going from 100 to 200 to 300 to 400 to 500, can we just choose to keep supplying more and more and more and more? No. We're going to run out of resources eventually. So the same thing holds in this graph in the long run. The supply of goods and services can only be so much. And it doesn't constraint on the connection between using resources to make things. And so we can only be so far. And so that so far is somewhere. And that is going to be the potential for the economy. So I'm going to use the notation large Y, which we've used for income. Remember, income equals spending, income equals real GDP. Subscript P for potential. So this is the potential for the economy. And that amount of gross domestic product is truly independent of prices. We couldn't get more if we tried. And so the aggregate supply curve is vertical. In other words, it doesn't matter if the price level is 100, 110, 200, 210. Doesn't matter where we are for prices. That is it. You just can't have any more. Okay. So this is what we're going to call the long run aggregate supply curve. So long run aggregate supply, LAS. The long run aggregate supply curve shows the economies potential level of output given full employment of resources. Now I snuck in a word here, full employment. What did that mean? Back to chapter 6, I guess. Full employment. I put full employment of resources, but we use that word full employment in regard to labor. The natural rate of unemployment. Yeah, that was that connection saying that if all of our resources are fully employed, there's still going to be some unemployment, and that is the full employment rate. So in other words, we're using all of our resources kind of at their long-run potential here, full employment. One of the key points is that this potential level of output that I identified on the graph is y subscript p superscript star asterisk. The potential level of output is independent of the price level. Now that's a little bit weird too. I want to make sure we flesh out the weirdness. The reason that holds is that if the price level's going up, all prices are going up. Resource prices and output prices. That's the key to that statement. So it kind of goes back to our labor market when if I told you that, hey, all the prices of the stuff on the shelves at Walmart's going to double tomorrow, but I'm going to give you twice as much money to go to the store to use, are you any worse off? No, your purchasing power is the same. So if you had $100 in your wallet to go buy stuff at Walmart at the given prices today, you'd be able to buy a certain amount of stuff. And if tomorrow I said every price on the shelf is going to double, but I'm going to give you $200 today, you're not going to sweat it. You're going to be able to go into the store and get the exact same quantities that you could before when you walk out of the store. So your real wage was maintained constant. Your purchasing power was constant. And that's what this is saying here, is that the potential level of real GDP is independent of prices. Because if they're all going up together, it doesn't matter. So in the long run, resource prices and output prices move together. Such that the purchasing power is constant. Since, remember, we are talking about real GDP, which is also income. Somebody's spending is the other person's income. That's kind of what this is playing on. So for example, a 100% increase in prices at Walmart don't matter if your income also went up by 100%. This is a super important point because we're going to deviate from it in a moment. So I want to make sure we're all tracking on that. Okay, so let's introduce some shifters since we're so close anyway here now. What are things that are going to make this thing creep to the right? What's going to make it move and start drifting over time this way? More resources. So one, a change in resources, more generically. So an increase in labor will lead to an increase in the long-run aggregate supply, a shift to the right now. An increase in machines, capital, will lead to an increase in long-run aggregate supply. I don't need to put the double one down, a shift to the right. So same things we saw in Chapter 6. Could be human capital for that matter. So maybe an increase in human capital. People, more education. I'll put K, I don't think we ever did HK, a different sign for that. But human capital would also lead to long-term economic growth. All the Chapter 6 material. What else? There's one more. So resource base, increase in resources will change it. What else? Technology. A change in technology. That new invention, that new discovery, a more efficient way to put things together. So we can't really think about technology moving the other direction very easily. So an increase in technology, more technology leads to an increase in long-run aggregate supply. Some industries might die because of it, but those resources will be reallocated into some other activity in the long run, causing more production ultimately, a higher level of income. Okay, now, some of you might be thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense from our supply curve. In micro class, oh, by the way, I wanted to make one more connection here. This is the same thing we memorized for test number 1. Shifts of the production possibilities frontier is this list. So we might just add that little note here. Note, same as PPF shifters. Because I do want you to keep those two